Well, as oil engages and disengages on very worrisome headlines, a major rift is turning the Persian Gulf into a tinderbox. Kuwait is recalling its ambassador from Iran, making it the latest Sunni ally of Saudi to cut or downgrade ties with Iran. Now, this move is in response to the attacks by protesters on Saudi embassies in Iran, including they set one of those embassies on fire. The protests initially broke out in countries across the Middle East, including Iran, after Saudi Arabia executed a prominent Shia cleric. James Smith is holding out hope for a near-term reconciliation. He served as the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia from 2009 to 2013. He also spent, we should say, 28 years in the U.S. Air Force. And I want to ask you about that military solution, sir. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here. Well, here's what's so interesting. Here's what's so interesting about this is that those that are actually rallying behind the Saudis. Okay, Sunni Muslim. This is Saudi Arabia, Sunni Muslim, and you look over at Iran, it's Shia. But Sunnis represent almost 90% of the Muslim population, 90%. So even if people deep down feel like what the Saudis did was wrong, they're still going to support them at the end of the day. Isn't this bad for Iran?
Well, the Saudis do not look at it as a Sunni-Shia issue. They look at it exclusively as a security issue. And while your focus has been on Sheikh al-Nimr, the reality of it is that there were 47 extremists that were executed. These go back to the bombings in 2003 to 2005. It includes those who attacked the U.S. consulate in Jeddah and killed our people there. And 43 of the 47 were actually Sunni, not Shia. So this issue is a domestic security issue for Saudi Arabia. It only is a sectarian issue for Iran, which is trying to make it into a Sunni-Shia fight.
Well, but does this justify? I mean, even the U.S., Britain, United Nations came out and showed that they were not happy with what the Saudis did. That we as a nation, we don't do this here in the United States. We don't just, and they say he got a fair trial. You could argue maybe he did not, but you know that's got to hurt our relationship with the Saudis, and also the fact that the way that they kind of went about this, it was a very unexpected move.
Unexpected because we weren't paying attention. But if you go back to 1980, after the takeover of the Holy Mosque in Mecca by Juhayman and his followers, when they captured Juhayman and his followers, they also tried them, sentenced a number of them to execution, and then carried out the executions in different cities around the country in the spring of 1980 to send the signal that this was not going to be tolerated. I agree that the Saudi system is severe. They draw a hard line where it comes to things like terrorism. And most of the rest of us would say it needs to be modernized. But this is their process. And in fact, even Sheikh Nimr faced 3 different trials with a total of 11 judges. Okay. So it's really unfair to say that he didn't get a fair trial according to their standards.
Okay, to their standards. Certainly that's different from American standards of justice. Really quick, I want to ask you about oil. I was looking at where a lot of these pipelines intersect on Saudi territory, Saudi land. It's a very Shia area. You've got 12 pipelines that basically are intersecting. This is a very dense network of oil. Do you think that these particular pipelines that are in the Shia area are at risk to sabotage, to terrorism from Shia supporters, Iranian supporters?
It's possible, but there's a lot of security devoted to the protection of the pipelines. And understand that the Shia population in the eastern province are the primary workers in Aramco. And some have said as many as 70% of Aramco are Shia. So they actually form part and parcel of the economic foundation for Aramco and Saudi Arabia's economy.
The tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran continue to echo throughout the Persian Gulf today as Kuwait became the latest Sunni nation to pull its ambassador from Tehran, though it did not fully cut off diplomatic ties. But how is this crisis seen from Iran? We go to William Brangham for that.
For more on the story, I'm now joined on the phone by Thomas Erdbrink, who's the New York Times bureau chief in Tehran. So, Thomas, Saudi Arabia executes this Shiite cleric, Nimr al-Nimr. Protests in Iran against the Saudis get out of hand, and the Saudi embassy in Iran is destroyed. You reported this morning that the government likely instigated those initial protests, but did they want it to get as far out of hand as it did?
Just today, one of the heads of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps told to the Fars news agency that what happened at the embassy was completely unjustifiable. It should have never have happened, and he was sure that his troops were not involved. And we've been hearing similar comments from other people in the Iranian establishment, which is clearly a sign that either they feel the protests have gone too far, or, of course, they have been shocked by the level of blowback from Saudi Arabia and are now trying to do some damage control. The focus completely shifted towards them because of their own actions. And this is what actually Iranian officials are telling me off the record. Look, we don't like to admit it, but we shot ourselves in the foot by doing this.
You report that this crisis comes at a time when Iran was really hoping to emerge as a growing power in the Middle East. They just signed the nuclear deal. Sanctions were soon to be eased. President Rouhani was hoping to be celebrating, not dealing with this. So what does this mean for him and for other reformers in Iran?
Well, of course, Mr. Rouhani came to power with the promise of mending relations with other countries. The historic nuclear deal was a clear example of his administration going out, negotiating for two full years, and then getting Iran a deal that its supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, could sign off on. So that by itself was a major boost for President Rouhani. But of course now, in a time that he was hoping to see the results of those negotiations, as sanctions are about to be lifted in the coming days or weeks, he is faced with the cheering remains of the Saudi Arabian embassy and several countries, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and two other nations that have either completely disconnected their diplomatic relations with Iran or have at least seriously downgraded them. So for President Rouhani, this is a setback. At the same time, he is trying naturally to come out with a more positive spin on this. He's been condemning, like many other officials, what happened at the embassy. And, of course, the Iranians are hoping that in the long run, it will be India and Saudi Arabia that will come out as the bad guy, if you will, out of this.
Let's look a little bit more broadly in the region. Does this jeopardize the larger diplomatic initiatives that Iran was involved in, the talks about ending the Syrian civil war and the fighting in Yemen? I mean, what does this crisis do to those efforts?
Well, it's absolutely a major obstacle. And let's face it, Iran is a player in those two theaters that you mentioned. It allegedly supports the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and of course it supports President Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Iran had just, through negotiations, gotten so far that it was invited in these major talks that we are seeing every couple of months on Saudi Arabia. The next one is about to take place on January 25th. But now the whole debate has shifted towards the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia instead of solving the crisis inside Syria. So if that meeting will still happen on the 25th, will Saudi Arabia allow it? Will Iran go along as it is now? Because we don't know how this will spin out of control. So all in all, this is a major obstacle to peace in Syria and Yemen.
Again, does this indicate that the Saudis intentionally killed Nimr now to incite this very reaction and set back the talks because they didn't like the way they were heading?
Well, absolutely. That's what the Iranians will also tell you. They feel as if a trap was laid out for them, and they sort of, stepped in it with their eyes closed. The view of the Iranians is that Saudi Arabia has always been the regional competitor. So whenever there is a conflict involving a Shia minority, or for instance the execution of this Shia Ayatollah in Saudi Arabia, the Iranians feel as if the Saudis are actually trying to hurt them.
Thomas Erdbrink of the New York Times, thank you very much.